Note that a vector in a plane can be represented as a matrix. Hence, the definition for operations like addition and scalar multiplication applies. Okay, so we define here the sum of the vectors. Let u and v be two vectors in the plane. The sum of the vectors u and v is the vector denoted by u plus v, whose components are u1 plus v1 and u2 plus v2. So if u is a vector and c is a scalar or a real number, then the scalar multiple denoted by this one, cu, of the vector u by c is the vector c times v is equal to this vector with component cu1 and y component cu2. Geometrically, vector addition and scalar multiplication can be represented as follows. Okay, this one here. So if you have vector u and if you have vector v, so the sum of the two vector is this vector. While for scalar multiplication, if u is this vector, so from the origin up to this point here, then if whenever c is a positive number, vector c times u is this vector. But if, for example, d is a negative number, then d times u is this vector. Now let us consider this figure. Alright, so ito yung u natin, vector u natin, ito naman yung ating vector v. Vector u has this component negative 2, 2, and the vector v naman has this component 4, tapos 2. So if you're going to add the two vectors, that will just be equal to, so negative 2 plus 4 is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4. So the vector with components 2 and 4, okay, 2 and 4 corresponds to this vector. Okay. So if you can see, no, it resembles a parallelogram. Okay, kunyari i-change natin itong u natin, ilagay natin dito, yung v naman ay nandito. So again, u plus v is this vector. Okay, change natin u. Okay, ito naman yung v natin. Nangyari ito. Ayan. Okay, so change natin. Alright, so the sun is at negative 6, negative 1. Okay, negative 6, negative 1. So, draw ka from origin to that point. That is just the sum of the two vectors. Alright, so kung nandito naman yung v mo, okay, that's negative 4, 1 plus 1, negative 2. So negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3, 1 plus negative 2 is negative 1. So you have this vector, negative 3, negative 1. Negative 3, negative 1. This is the sum of the two vectors. Okay, so for scalar multiple naman, let us consider this vector v with the scalar a is equal to 0. So if we increase the value of a, alright, so if you can see, this w here is the vector w, that is just 0.5 of v. So kalahati yan siya ng vector v. But right, so i-increase pa natin. So kung gawin mo siyang 1, of course yung c times the vector or a in this case, no? So a kasi yan. So a times the vector v is just the vector v. But if you're going to increase the a by 1.5, right? So isa at kalahati ng v yung scalar multiple niya. Now, kung ita-times 2 natin, ayan. So, the component, okay, the components of W are twice, okay, the components of the vector V. Okay, so kung i-decrease naman natin yung ano niya, ayan, so, yung A, okay, the vector W will be the opposite, okay, of this vector V. Tapos, kalahati lang siya ng vector V. So, again, kung i-increase pa natin, okay, when A is equal to 1, in this case, dapat equal siya. Okay, ayan. Alright. Right, kung magiging 2 naman, okay, you have this one. Oops, hindi nakita. Alright, so the components of this one is twice, okay, the components of V, pero mga negative na yung kanyang components. Alright? Okay, for another example, if C is equal to 2 and D is equal to negative 3, given that vector U is this vector with components 2 and negative 3, let us see and what happens, okay? So, ito yung U natin. Of course, yung 2 tapos negative 3 that is located at the fourth quadrant. So, ito yung vector U natin. Okay? If you're going to multiply that by 2, alright? In this case, yung C kasi natin is 2, kaya siya 2 times U. Dapat magta-times 2 lahat, no, ng components. So, instead of 2, you have 4. Instead of negative 3, dapat negative 6. Okay? So, that is this one. And, because negative naman yung D, okay, so yung negative 3U mo ay on the opposite direction, and 3 times the vector U, 3 times the components of vector U, pero nasa negative. So, we have this one. Okay, this vector. Okay, kasi nga, negative 3 times U, ano? So, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, tapos negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. The vector 0, so with component 0, 0 is called the 0 vector. So, geometrically, that is just a point located at the origin. Alright, so for the results, okay, first result. If U is any vector, then vector U added by 0 is just vector U. And number 2, for any vector U, U plus negative 1 times U is equal to 0. So number 1 is true because the components of vector or the 0 vectors are all 0. So plus i-add mo sa component ng U, that will not affect the components of the vector U. So kahit anong number pa yan, i-add mo sa mga components niya na 0, it will just go back to the vector U. So you have just the vector U. And for any vector, this is also true because this is the negative of the negative of the components of U. So pag i-add mo, so magiging 0 siya. For our notation, we will write negative U or negative vector U instead of negative 1 times vector U. So this vector is called the negative of vector U. So in effect, the vector U plus the negative of the negative 1, okay, the vector V because of this one. Okay, so with this notation, we can now define the difference between two vectors geometrically, okay? So, consider this vector U and this vector V. So, kanina, yung ating sum ng dalawang vector ay located somewhere here. Okay? But for the difference, nandito na siya. Alright? So, take note that the negative of vector b is its opposite. Nandun siya sa kabila. And if you're going to add these two vector, the sum will be this. Alright? Or you can just look at that using this one. So, ito yung u, ito yung v natin. The sum is in here, while the difference is parang the other diagonal. So it's equal to this vector. So geometrically yun yung ating pagtingin doon. Okay, so we also can view the difference of vector u and vector v using this diagram. Okay, so ito yung vector u, ito yung vector v. So the u minus v is this vector. Alright? Kasi magma-minus v ka. So the minus v is on the opposite direction. That is this color yellow-green. Alright? So i-add mo ngayon ito na vector and ito na vector. So basically yung kanyang sum ay ito na vector. So, if you're going to move, kunyari, ito yung u natin. So, the difference will be this vector. Okay, so kung i-move natin ng pag-ganon, the difference will be this vector. Alright? So, you have that. Alright, so for now, I will let